The kiss was given, the signal was received, and immediately the adrenaline of the conspiracy began to fade. He likely stood in the shadows waiting for a display of power, expecting the master to call down fire or spark the uprising his followers had long envisioned. But when Jesus yielded peacefully to the guards, that political illusion dissolved. He realized he hadn't forced God's hand to spark a revolution, he had merely arranged a murder. This is the weight of 30 pieces of silver. An hour ago, it was a fortune resting on his hip. Now it felt like a millstone tied directly to his soul. The betrayal is only the prologue. The enduring tragedy of Judas is the psychological collapse that follows the realization that his choice was final. He fled the garden, scrambling back up the steep paths of the Kidron Valley and vanishing into the pitch-black, narrow alleys of Jerusalem. Guilt creates an immediate, suffocating paranoia. Even though the midnight streets were completely empty, he felt the heavy, judging eyes of the entire city bearing down on him. For him, the psychological toll quickly became physical. Treason acted like a poison in his bloodstream, and his own body began rejecting the reality of his actions. Then came the mental torture of the memory. The foresight Jesus showed at the Last Supper burned in his mind, echoing with a terrifying finality. What you are about to do, do quickly. Hell is often described as total isolation. For the traitor, that isolation didn't wait for the afterlife. It began while he was still walking the stones of the city. By dawn, desperation drove him back to the source of the transaction. He sprinted toward the massive Temple Mount, hoping he could somehow reverse the contract. He burst into the halls, sweating and frantic, only to find the high priests standing in immaculate robes. They were coldly preparing for the Passover, entirely indifferent to the blood on their hands. Holding out the heavy leather pouch, his composure finally broke. He confessed to betraying innocent blood, begging them to take the money back and undo the act. The religious elite looked down at him and delivered one of the most terrifying replies in history. "What is that to us? That is your responsibility." Unable to bear the weight of the currency another second, he violently hurled the pouch across the marble floor of the sanctuary. The high-pitched ringing of metal echoing through the hall was the sound of a soul fracturing beyond repair. He walked out of the gates as a man without a master, without a friend, and without hope. He wandered aimlessly out of the city gates. He had left the silver on the sanctuary floor, but he could not leave behind the guilt. He descended into the valley of Hinnom, an ancient ravine south of Jerusalem, known as Gehenna. Historically a site for child sacrifice and burning refuse, it was the physical representation of a cursed wasteland. His mind offered no refuge. He was tormented by the miracles he had witnessed and pierced by the sharpest blade of all, the memory that Jesus' final word to him was friend. Approaching the edge of a cliff, he spotted a gnarled, dead tree hanging over the abyss. Taking off his own belt, the same strap that had held the silver, he prepared a final exit from the noise in his head. The barren landscape provided a grim solution. It perfectly matched his own internal desolation, confirming his belief that he had fallen far beyond the reach of any rescue. 2 deep personal failures occurred that Friday night. Peter denied, and Judas betrayed. Both men fell, but their reactions to that fall determined their eternity. In this theological framework, Judas's defining sin is despair, the conviction that his actions outpaced divine mercy. When Peter's heart broke, it broke outward, seeking mercy. When the traitor's heart broke, it collapsed inward, choosing the harsh authority of his own self-condemnation. He was not a robot programmed for destruction. He was a man exercising the deeply terrifying autonomy of his own free will. This is the tragedy of that autonomy. God will not force a person to be saved, and so Judas chose to execute the judgment he believed he deserved. Meanwhile, a dark irony was playing out in the temple. Refusing to put the tainted silver back into the treasury, the priests used the blood money to purchase a desolate plot to bury foreigners. The physical end was gruesome. When the afternoon earthquake struck, the branch snapped, sending his body plummeting down the violent drop of the jagged ravine. The land purchased was the potter's field, forever renamed Aceldama, the field of blood. It was the exact land where he fell, forever linking the currency of his treason to the site of his end. Judas could have been entirely forgiven if he had only walked to Golgotha instead of Gehenna. The blood being shed that day could have washed even him. His name stands as a permanent warning about the destructive isolation of pride. It serves as evidence that no matter the crime, running toward the light is the only escape from the dark.